Ahoy, and welcome back to Titanic Talkline. I am Alexia, and I have my damsel Galley back again. Hello.
Hello. I feel damselly today.
Me too.
That's
And I
nice.
feel slightly in distress because we're getting back into. I just inhaled a dust particle.
Ooh.
Excellent. There's not a lot of dust in the thing we're about to discuss. It's a very, very watery show. We are getting into episode 2 of the Titanic miniseries. Hooray.
Yeah. Well, specifically the 2012
Oh yeah, that's right. I
Titanic
have to
miniseries.
specify.
Yeah.
Yes, the 2012 one, just quick recap for people who haven't seen it. This is directed by Julian Fellows. This is not the Catherine Zeta-Jones dealio. This is a four-parter. And we talked about episode 1, and I was supposed to do a summary for episode 2, but two things about that. So much of what happened in episode 2 is a recap of what happened in episode 1, so it's sort of like I
Yes.
don't need a thing. And also some of it is not abundantly apparent without the like wiki provided plot summary. So I'm actually just going to read the plot summary from the wiki, and this is for episode 2, which is called Second and Third Class. It just here we go.
Smart.
Going Going back to before the ship's ill-fated voyage, the designers of the ship are in conflict over how many lifeboats should be on the boat. One of them hires Irishman Jim Maloney to get more no, to get a more competent team to finish the behind schedule electrical wiring in exchange for transporting his family to America for a new life. I didn't read that right. I don't Side note to everyone, this is white on like navy blue text. I am not a fan of dark mode. I'm one of those people that like I find it harder to read. So I'm having a much harder time reading this because I'm like it's like white on very dark blue.
Oh, I'm
Um
so surprised. I'm looking at the wiki and it's it's not in dark mode for me.
I know, but I'm on the Titanic fandom wiki.
Ah, actually, I want to keep hearing your writing of your reading of this because I thought you were on the official Wikipedia, which has a summary that is either going to be identical or very similar to yours.
I've just clicked over to the one you're talking about. Okay, but I'm gonna finish the one I
Yeah.
started, and then I'm gonna speed read the other one just for. I'm gonna speed read them both. Okay.
Nice.
Although his wife Mary isn't sure of the move, they go anyway, and Jim manages to secure the family a room in third class. However, a stranger and fellow passenger Peter makes Mary wary by constantly appearing nearby, and soon makes the acquaintance of Mary's husband. Meanwhile, Italian fireman Mario's brother, Ballo Santorini, catches the eye of a beautiful stewardess, Annie Desmond. The couple from episode 1, John and Muriel Batley, are shown having a turbulent time in their marriage. The ship hits the iceberg, and the Maloney family is trapped below decks. Peter steps out by attacking one of the stewards so Mary and her children can pass. However, both he and Jim are trapped below decks. Mary and her children manage to get on board a lifeboat, but the Batleys are not so lucky, and the cliffhanger shows them with Second Officer Lightoller, the Earl of Manton, and Harry Widener attempting to ride an overturned lifeboat as the water reaches the boat deck.
That is nearly word for word the official Wikipedia
You
summary of
know,
that.
I'm betting you that whoever it was copy and like tweaked it slightly. I'm gonna read if I read other ones, I'm just gonna read from the wiki because that was actually slightly painful for my eyeballs.
Yeah,
But
don't. We
so
we
yeah.
already have to deal with really bad lighting in this series. You don't need to deal with it while reading the summaries.
Yeah, speaking of lighting, do you want to get right into it? Because the first scene is about like electrical lighting, I think, right? Like and wiring.
So actually, um, from my notes, the very first scene was all of the old white men talking about how there's no need to have extra lifeboats.
Ah, yes, yes, yes. The very obvious sort of I don't even know what to call this scene in like in a soap opera or in a sitcom, but you all know everyone knows this scene.
Yeah.
It's where, the evil corporation is like, and they'll never discover our evil plan.
Yeah, it's basically where everyone sits around and goes, so we could either do something that's going to be safe and help, thousands of people just in
Right.
case an emergency goes wrong, or we could not because adding more lifeboats is going to make the boat look fat, and we don't really want that.
No, why would we do that? We're a good company. We hire Catholics.
Oh my God, that too.
This I forgot that this episode has my favorite line in it, and it has to. This episode is the religion episode where it's all. This episode was so focused on the conflict. Now, I will. excuse me, say that I'm sorry, everyone. I've mentioned this on the show before. Like, I don't drink a lot of soda, so when I do, it's kind of like, wow. And yeah, stuff's happening. I don't know very much about Irish history, admittedly. I also don't know very much about politics in general, but I do know that in Ireland around this time, I don't know if it started quite in 1912 or maybe a little after, there was extremely tense sentiments between Protestants and Catholics. And I don't know why, I don't nobody asked me that, but I do know that there was quite strong feelings in that way.
Yeah, there was a lot of anti-Catholic sentiment in Ireland, and I also am not one for religious wars because to
No.
me, as someone who is not Christian, it's all Christianity to me. But I did write a quote that was no career for a Catholic in Belfast.
Yes, that and that he says something similar to that again later. This is the electrician Jim Maloney.
Hmm.
And okay, I'm reading my notes here. I said there's a lot of emphasis on the rush and of the building of the ship and how everything's being rushed. Um, so not true, really. Titanic was actually built pretty well as far as ships go. There's a lot of inaccuracies in the show. I've discussed a couple of them in the previous one, specifically about like the officer's conduct, which is bananas. But another thing that I think this was this episode where they bring it up. They're like, first class is all full, et cetera, et cetera. The Titanic was not a sold out ship. There was cabins in all classes available at the time
So
of sailing.
so that has me asking a question because I thought it was very odd that the what appears to be the head electrician,
Mm-hmm.
Jim Maloney, was told, "Hey, by the way, congrats, you get to ride the Titanic too.
Uh-huh.
But we're gonna have to put you in third class. Sorry, that's the best we can do." Was that actually accurate? Do you know?
I so I talked about this a while ago on the show, I believe, with Stephen Beale. And while when we look at this now in the discrepancy, we see haves and have nots. But he says think of it less as that and more of haves and have a little lesses. Because
Mm,
traveling on Titanic was a luxury ship, point blank, period. You know, people could choose to take cheaper accommodations. There were other options for you. You didn't have to take Titanic if you wanted to, or any White Star Line ship. And third class was for many people a revolutionary experience. It was the first time many people had been served food. Dining out in restaurants were extremely new experiences. And for most people, you would, host grand dinner parties in your home. People would serve you in other people's homes. Being able to go out was also a luxury experience. You'd have to have a lot of money to go to a restaurant. So here you were on this ship, and other people were serving you. These were people traveling across America who were maids and tradesmen. This was probably the first time they'd ever had something like that. And so when this guy is like, "Oh, you're putting us in third class, blah, blah, blah," he's talking about it pretty grouchy, but it would kind of be, I guess it's not at all comparable, but comparable to if someone gave us, you and me, two complimentary tickets on a cruise ship, but they were an interior room. Like, yeah, the room's not
not
great,
bad.
but we're still going on a cruise. We can
Yeah.
figure it out. A little bit of it might suck. Like, yeah, the bedroom might be a little cramped. We might not love it, but come on.
Well, I think that's what's always kind of perplexed me about the Titanic media, I guess, that I've consumed, is they definitely make third class appear mm, like they make it appear as though you are sitting in the very back of the plane right next to the bathroom, and the bathroom is constantly being used and it smells terrible, and you're like kind of left to fend for yourself. And there's a baby in front of you that is just incessantly trying to steal your food. Like it it definitely appears a lot worse and rowdy than I think what you're describing it as, which sounds like, okay, maybe third class is just more like a regular economy seat. You don't get that much leg room. You're not going to be behind the curtain in first class with all of those fancy hoity-toity people, but you're still flying to the same destination and you're still relatively in a, comfortable position.
Yeah, honestly, it's exactly that because also this was 1912. No cabins had air conditioning, for example. Like, no cabins had, total and complete sanitary style indoor plumbing. There wasn't any sort of cabin that had what we would consider a modern accommodation, but all classes of cabin had, this was a far cry from when people would actually call third class steerage class, because you would have to sleep and deal and everything in a big communal hall, like that's where it got
Hmm.
its name. You'd have to bring your own bedding that was not provided, so you had to bring that for yourself, and
Hmm.
you had to bring your own food. You would also not have
Oh,
access to refrigeration or anything. So that's where a lot of people would get food poisoning on voyages because, you'd have to bring 5 to 7 days worth of food and no way of keeping it good. And if you're traveling with a bunch of people, you have to keep track of it all. So that's where comparable accommodations used to be. And then this was a step up again for people who could afford it. This was a step up where it's like you have your own bed, maybe not your own room, in third class, but you have your own bed at the very least. You'll
hmm.
get served 3 meals a day and then some sort of like coffee and tea. And yeah, each cabin or hallway has a steward, an attendant or two. So it's sort of like, yeah, is it not, as you were saying, a luxury experience? No, but it wasn't as bad as Maloney is going off about, especially again considering that it's last minute and tickets to America for most people were life savings worthy, life altering, life changing. And the fact that this guy is like, I'm giving you 7 tickets for
Yeah.
you and your family to start a new life in America. This gift that most people would absolutely melt for. This is yours, please take it. And he's just like, well, you didn't want to put us in first class. It's sort of like, uh, I get where you're coming
Yeah.
from, but I think, again, I think my comparison, which is not really it, because we don't travel the same way anymore, but it's just like, if someone offered us, again, interior rooms on a cruise, it'd be like, we can suck it up to sleep in them. We can dorm style it for a few minutes to enjoy the other amenities. That's kind of how I view it. So yeah, his attitude's a bit funny. And then this whole thing where he steals a bigger room from 3 people, a room meant for like 8 people from 3 men who don't even know each other, is bananas. When again, as I mentioned, it wasn't totally sold out. Titanic had room. This would not have been like a necessary weird conflict. And honestly, the first time it happened, I missed that he was just taking somebody else's room. And I thought this was some weird stowaway situation.
Yeah. Like it it kind of sounds like the reason that he was miserable on this trip, excluding the future, that's about to happen. Um, was more so because he was stuck in a tiny room with 6 other family members and his absolutely miserable wife, Mary.
Oh my God. Can we talk about Mary for the rest of this episode?
Another miserable woman.
I'm sorry. I came to the conclusion that Julian Fellow, whoever the scriptwriter is, hates women. This man is
Yeah.
whoever wrote the script is a misogynist, because there's not a single redeeming woman who isn't totally like Georgiana's a bit of a Mary Sue.
Yeah.
And she's
A
the only
Annie
Annie.
Desmond too.
Annie's also a bit of a Mary Sue. She's got quote unquote a little agency, but it's
Hmm.
sort of that like implied agency. Also, why is her hair always covering her ears? That annoys the shit out of me. But Mary is so a crux of this entire thing is her interaction with this other character named Peter. And
Yeah.
the first time we encounter her, she looks like she is so scared of him, she's gonna pee her pants.
I
She
thought
looks
that
terrified.
I thought that Peter had like so the way that she runs into him is the entire brood is going to the Titanic, and for
Mhm.
whatever reason, as always happens in these stupid pieces of cinema,
Right?
one kid just decides to run off
At
without
the last
saying
second.
anything. Yeah, anything like that. So Mary goes after her son, and Peter is the one who's like, "Hello, I found your child. Here you go." And for whatever reason, her reaction to that made me think that was Peter a serial killer? Like, why was she reacting to him like, "Oh my God, do not touch my child"?
Well, it turns out she maybe's not wrong. It never
Y-
gets fully resolved, but I think we're supposed to have it implied that he is this like serial killer. Everyone
Yeah.
says he is.
So so before we get into again
Yeah,
Mary being
sorry.
miserable, Peter Lubov is this character, and apparently
Yes.
he was based on Peter the Painter, but
Yeah.
Peter the Painter never went on the Titanic.
No. And this goes back to the whole thing I was talking about where there was already a perfect setup for a fictional tie-in for this show. There was the Downton Abbey tie-in literally in Julian Fellowes'
Yeah,
hands. And he was like, whoops, I dropped it. And then
yeah.
starts bringing in these things which are very odd and speculative. It would be like saying, and then he ran into Jack the Ripper, who was a stoker. Like you can't just throw in everything that was potentially relevant in Europe in that year into this mini series. It becomes too cluttered and everyone becomes shallow.
I'm really disappointed that we didn't get to see like Anastasia on the boat or something like that.
Oh, that's how she got away.
That's how she avoided. Yeah.
Um, I have a few more notes before we go back to those two. Even though I brought up like 73 other things about the officers,
Mhm.
they have that weird discussion where they're basically like, "You're out." That's not how that happened. They didn't just like say you're out because you don't take orders. It was a combination of things. There was a coal strike in London at the time. So a lot of voyages were being canceled, redirected, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of officers were then being shuffled around. And that's what ultimately led to that happening and Blair being dismissed as an officer from the lineup.
Ah, that's who Blair was. I actually
Yes.
completely forgot about
Excuse
who
me.
Blair was, but did have a note that said Blair will look back on this and be so happy.
I know he'll just be like, "Honey, get in here."
Yeah, if
We're
there were a
happy.
TV.
Yes, exactly. Um, so I that was my note on that, and also they need to wear their hats. Officers were always wearing their hats. Just I brought this up last time. Put your hat on.
How rude of him to not wear hats.
Rude of them. Also, one of my notes just says this lady is so Irish.
That's not the one. Okay. I guess that this is a I don't remember who said this quote, but I wrote down a quote of half of them look suspiciously like Catholics.
That is my favorite line in the entire show. I heard it in the trailer. It is said by Lady Manton in the church where she leans into her husband and just mutters, "Have them look suspiciously like Catholics." And it's
I
truly my favorite line in this entire show.
I would love to just stand in a Boston square and just say that.
Half of them look suspiciously like Catholics. And with
Yeah.
no context and just walk away.
Yeah.
Um, So yeah, we meet Mary, the lady that is so Irish, and my other note says she is horrified by this man. So yeah, this man, the serial killer, comes around the corner holding her son's hand. Two things about it. Number one, how does she know? And number two, as we later find out, sorry, spoilers, no spoilers, she's supposed to be like so hot for this dude. Like that's
No.
supposed to be her reaction. Her reaction is supposed to be, "Oh yeah." But what I'm getting is, "Oh no."
I, I hate I kind of hate this trope in
Me too.
cinema where when a woman is interested in someone, she has a very stoic, like far away glance at them, like a very long stare, a
Yes.
long silent stare with very tight lips. And you're supposedly supposed to read that as this woman is flooding her basement right now. But it totally just comes off as I really wish this human being would get away from me as far as possible. And that was just
Yeah.
Mary's expression the entire show.
Right. Because tension is not a good thing when you're aroused. That, in that
I mean, for
capacity.
some people it
I
might
mean,
be,
in some
but
ways, but like when you I that's not your norm. I don't feel like most people when they're smitten or instantly like into somebody, I don't feel that most people's initial reaction is that level of tension
yeah.
because again, whoever's directing this poor woman just had her come off completely absolutely fucking scared of this dude, like from the onset. So my whole thing was, as soon as, later on we're confronted with the rumors about him, I was like, she knew. And
That's what
then
I thought.
later on, right. And then later on, it's revealed that she did not know. She was just, hot for rescuer. Super weird. But yeah, that leads into their encounter, leads into the scene where I wrote, "Don't steal rooms."
I, that was such a perplexing encounter for me. Like completely useless, as you were saying, because
Yeah.
they could have found an empty room. But
Yes.
also, it wasn't really this is one of my pet peeves again about cinema, the don't tell them any information trope.
Right.
Why did Jim not say a word to his supposedly wife that he is obsessed and in love with to tell her that, hey, I'm gonna try to steal us a better room, so just play along. Nope.
Yeah, play along.
Yeah, he doesn't do any of that. It's just like,
Yeah.
all right, kids, everyone come with me. Oh, don't worry about the fact that this door is locked and I'm going to jimmy it open. Oh, also, let's get inside and be very quiet. Like,
What's happening
just
here?
communicate with your partner just a little
And
bit.
again, like in this show, they keep saying about like how it's sold out, it's sold out, it's sold out, and how that one room that came available went to Georgiana. They're like, no, 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 there's a waiting list. I was like, no, historically incorrect. There were open, there was space. Like this wouldn't have been a thing. But don't steal rooms. I have don't steal rooms written down twice here. Um, in separate places, but in between them, I wrote down a quote from, I don't remember who it was, but it was talking about Paolo and Mario, and it said, the Italians are an excitable breed and they're politically unstable, which was some fantastic wordsmithing about just racisms.
There is so much racism against Italians.
Yeah, this is the anti-Catholic and anti-Italian episode. The whole show is very
Yeah.
anti-Italian, but this one in particular is just like, whoa.
I mean, I just feel like I feel like we need to go a little bit further with our historical dramas. And instead of picking apart all of the different types of white people that we can be anti against, we should just be just total anti-white people. Like
Okay.
literally everybody on the Titanic should have been very upset that there was any other human being on that Titanic because they were surrounded by white people and they don't know their religion, nor do they know like what part of Europe they're from. Like just be mad at everyone.
Just be mad.
Yeah.
I'm still mad at Annie covering her ears with her hair
You should
at
be.
all
And
times.
maybe that's really the thing that we should be uh it's not really racist, is it, to be against people who cover their ears with their hair?
No, I think that's just practical.
Yeah,
It's
I don't
annoying.
know. I need to go talk to Vincent Van Gogh and see what the prejudice is
Oh,
against ears.
okay. Speaking of prejudice, there's a brief scene where we see Paolo. So Mario, the older brother, is shown getting his younger brother. Well, it's he's the stoker, and he gets his younger brother the job as the dining steward. Excuse me. So he's serving dinner in first class, and he's serving, and Georgiana smiles at him, and he fucking winks at her. What a moron. I mean,
Right?
here, you and I are obviously both not a big fan of class barriers, but we also both are fully ass aware that if we lived in 1912, we'd have to follow some very different rules. And one of those rules would be, thou shalt not, as a steward, wink at a first class lady
Yeah, but what you
in
didn't
plain
see
view
in
of everybody in the room. Excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but in plain view of everyone in thine room, which is
but what you
large.
no, please keep interrupting me as I try to see.
Oh, I'm
Um, but what you didn't see was the fine print to that rule, which was
done.
unless she is Georgiana, who is definitely a Mary Sue main character here. Like
Yeah,
so that was also just another like strange thing to me that I felt was very modern. Like I felt like that was a very modern take for somebody to just like wink flirtatiously.
super. I thought
Yeah.
that was very anachronistic in that way. I mean, again, I'm not saying that winking is a modern gesture. Excuse me, but in that context, at that time, in that situation, in that location, it seems like the least appropriate thing. It would
Yeah.
have been more appropriate if he'd outrightly smiled and nodded at her, like,
Yeah.
my lady.
Yeah.
That would have
Given a
been,
bow.
yeah, I think either of those gestures would have been as mocking as we're being. I think they would have been more appropriate because it would have been that like weird upper class deference.
Hmm.
And it might have been like now a little overzealous, but it would have been like, oh ha ha ha, look at him, he doesn't know, as opposed to what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah. As opposed to like, honestly, I felt like it kind of played into that really annoying Italian stereotype that
Yeah,
everyone is so overt with their emotions in Italy
so
that they just can't
flirty.
contain it. Yeah, so flirty.
I don't wasn't Kathleen Manigan? I don't remember. I was listening to a comedian who was talking about like if you want to feel appreciated, if you want to feel observed and loved, go to Italy.
Yeah.
And it's again that kind of jokey stereotype deal, but yeah, it plays into it. And I thought it was very tone deaf in an episode that was already quite basically literally hammering home the anti-Italian sentiment. It's sort of like you're not making your argument for yourself. It's like you're making it harder.
It also didn't really have any purpose. Because it's not
Mm-mm.
like Paolo and Georgiana begin some type of like romantic relationship. Like literally nothing comes of this besides him getting in trouble.
Right, and that could have been totally avoided.
There's a lot of plot lines in here that I feel could have been totally
Okay,
avoided.
don't disagree.
Totally.
Twiddly, what was it? Are we twiddly enough for the Twiddle Club?
I don't know, but are you ready for Sunday service with all of the Catholics?
Wait. Did Sunday service come after that weird interaction? Yes, it did. It came after that weird interaction in the third class dining room where Peter and Jim are talking and
Suddenly they're friends, by the way.
suddenly they're friends. Also, this is where last episode I was saying like that some parts of this show have some bananas lines in them. This episode must have been written by that person because this episode had some primo lines. We've got Lady Manson's sick burn about Catholics in 5 seconds, but this episode has Peter saying, "Let the downtrodden cringe from the lash of their masters," and I can just see somebody writing that down and being like, "Oh, that's good."
That's how casual people talk.
Yeah, that's how my bro and I talk having a beer after dinner. What?
Was this also because I'm forgetting the third class scenes a little bit, but was this also the scene where Mary not so subtly like drops something
Oh my God, that's like exactly that. Like I think almost after he says that line, she basically yeets a thing of thread.
like a thimble or something
Yeah,
like that? Yeah.
something. And it rolls over to them, and Peter picks it up and puts it back on the table for her. And instead of acting human, she acts like C3PO who's been powered down. Just kind of
Just let
sits
me
there.
ignore this.
Yeah, but also in the weirdly stiffest way possible. She's not even sitting normally. She's like rearranged herself purposely to be in an awkward position, like sit, nor both Lee. This is how humans sit. And deprogram 2, 1.
She she kind of reminded me a little bit of a cat in this scene because she she basically acknowledges the fact that her husband and Peter, her part-time lover, part-time serial killer, I guess, um,
Part-time night terror.
part-time night terror, are apparently having a conversation because they're the best of buds. Not that we ever knew that. But she like it
Why
it
would we
kind
need
of
to?
felt like she was staring at them and then just knocked something off of the table to get them to go pick it up. And it was just kind of like a cat, just like, this is your problem now. And then when it's returned to them, again, like a cat, just be like, I don't know what that is. I don't want it.
Except she had her back to them. And again, had that same look of fucking terror the entire time he was nearby. And
This is
then
weird flirting.
it is. We get the next big scene is the church scene, but right before we get there, we get this tiny little cutaway to Paolo, who has just finished winking at Georgiana and Annie on the first class promenade, just hanging together
Right?
like normal. On the list of things that just wouldn't be allowed with a capital W, B, and A, that's one of them.
Yeah, there were a couple of moments where it seemed like the workers were just like, no, we have off time, we'll chill. And I'm like, I don't think you guys had requisite breaks in this time period.
No, and if you did, you weren't able to just like chill with the passengers. I covered this a little bit in the first episode too, where I was saying that Lightoller is way too comfortable with the passengers.
Hmm.
Yeah, they're all a little bit kind of like that. Anytime anyone runs into any kind of office, they're just like, "Hey, man, what's going on?" Like you can't fraternize with the staff like that. That was just not White Star Line protocol.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, there was a lot of flirting with protocol. There's a lot of flirting point blank period. And also by the time we get to this church scene and we see people like filing into the church, I'd forgotten about the Mantons. I was like, who are these people?
Yeah, I was a little well, not disappointed to see them again. I think it was more of that, oh right, you milk toast folks are here.
Oh yeah, you people. Yeah, you're here to just make your crazy observation about half of them looking suspiciously like Catholics.
Yeah, you're offended to constantly or sorry, wow. Eh. Yeah, you're showing up to just be offended and clutch your pearls. Like that was all Lady Manton did.
Yeah, very much so. The entire church service was weird because again, on the real ship, you didn't there wasn't an all class service.
I thought that that was strange. Like it
Yeah.
seemed like they would have a service for each class because I would also imagine that a fair amount, if not the entire ship, would want to go to service because I have a hard time imagining that there were any non-Christians aboard this ship.
There were
Were they actually
mostly
open about it?
some would have been.
Ah,
Like the
interesting.
Strausses were Jewish.
Okay, well that's fair. That is fair.
There, but yes, there were services for all classes, but there wasn't one great big mixed class ceremony. So that was super weird. And it was just an excuse for Lady Manton to be rude and for Peter and Mary to once again share the weirdest chemistry ever.
God, that was such a strange scene. So, if I'm remembering it correctly, Peter was already in service, and then
One of them, I
Mary
think
sees
Mary
him.
was.
Okay, so Mary takes her seat, and then
One of the
Peter goes
two
over to
just,
sit by her.
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, he gets there like a second or two later or something, but
yeah.
yeah, and then it just fades out. Um,
Well, he says something to her, but we don't get to know what he says until a later episode.
yes, that's right. And she gives him another horrified look, which leads me to believe that what he says to her is, if you say a word, I will kill every one of your children, starting with the youngest.
Right? That's what I thought too. Like all of this was him threatening her.
Yeah, every single thing that he does to her leads you to believe that they have a history, or either she knows who he is, or that he has something over her.
Yeah, but all
But
of it is negative.
all of it is negative. And speaking of negative, Miriam Batley is
My God.
fucking wild because they go back to her room and she basically is just like, I know all of your client secrets because I read your documents. And when he's like, why would you fucking do that, she goes, what would you suggest I do? Literally anything
Not.
else?
Yeah.
Yeah, not. Yeah, not a great start. I was thinking, I literally wrote down in my notes, so
Yeah, I wrote a ship in the middle of the ocean is the perfect time to have an argument and get mad at your partner. Like she brought this up. Like she intentionally brought this up to have an argument. You could see it.
yeah, and because this conversation came out of nowhere where she's like, because you're covering for, I don't remember exactly the wording she used, but she's like, you're covering for this dude. And he's like, what did you do?
Yeah.
Where it's kind of like, I'm nosy too. I'm that kind of person, but I know what's off limits, you know?
Yeah. Also, if you're going to be nosy like that and you have all of that proprietary information, again, just like pick the time and the place when you feel like you should share it. Or if you want to keep being nosy, maybe don't share it so that
Yeah.
nobody's suspicious of you.
Exactly. And then they try to explain away her bitterness by doing the old classic, I wish I could have given you a child.
I love that. I love how it felt very how very different. She begins the argument by saying, "Hey, I know all of your bullshit and I have all of this against you," but then
Uh-huh.
ends it by saying, "By the way, I'm so sorry I couldn't give you a child." Like, what? What is that flip-flopping?
Well, he was apologizing to her about that.
Oh, that's
But
fair.
either way, it's basically just like, I'm sorry that our marriage was like not childful. Sorry about that. But, painting the classic bitter, infertile woman.
Yeah.
And then she comes out with this Monty Python of a zinger where she says that Lady Mansion has the brains of a kipper and the charisma of an egg, which sounds like a cutout line from Your mother was a hamster and your father sold of elderberries. You have
Yeah.
the brain of a
Honestly,
kipper and the charisma of an egg.
that's a good line.
I thought it was extremely funny, but it was one of those things where she starts it off being this horrible bitch, and then they turn her into this, oh, it's because she can't have children. Look, and now she's crying. Wah, wah.
I had no sympathy for her, but I
No.
do feel that her long-suffering husband, John Batley, played by Toby Jones, has the
Mm-hmm.
saddest face in cinema. Like
He
he
very
just
much
has,
does.
yeah, when he has just a blank expression, you're just like, "Oh, Toby, I'm so sorry. Let me give you a hug."
Exactly. And then we go from that, kind of supposed to be like sweet scene to Captain Smith living out his fantasies of being a NASCAR driver, a NASCAR racer, being like, well, I think we can go a little faster. What do you think? Just
Yes, yes, let's do it. This is
yeah,
the time for us to experiment with our speeds. Yes.
good, good.
Do it.
That's all this was. Yeah,
Do
that's all this was. Very much that thing. Yeah, it immediately comes this thing where it's like we're painting a clear villain here, which I will say is interesting that they went for Smith because normally they go for Ismay, which is what they did in the Cameron film.
I just think it's funny that you can like I know that movies and TV shows have to do this with plot, but I think it's funny that they're trying to like make a villain out of a singular person for
Yeah,
this.
yeah, there is. That's a very hard thing to do. But I guess also, especially when you're, as we discussed last time, like the 96th person to make a Titanic thing, you gotta take a fresh angle, and this is one way to do it. Also, Captain Smith being a therapist is an interesting one because that weird non-versation he had with Batley outside was, what can help me? What?
I kind of did my summarization of what that interaction was,
Okay,
which was Batley saying, "Let me apologize for my miserable wife," and the captain going, "Ah, of course. Well, I'll leave you to your misery. Good night," and just walking away.
yeah, basically. An absolutely bananas conversation. And then they show what we later see is the iceberg collision from Batley's point of view.
Mhm.
And then Captain Smith and Andrews have a really weird Scooby-Doo run around in the bowels of the ship when the water is pouring in, and then stop to have some A plus very long exposition in front of a gushing wall.
Yeah. So the iceberg hit at around 34 minutes in, which
Mm-hmm.
is where it will hit for the three of the four episodes. It
Uh,
keeps hitting at the exact same timestamp.
yes.
And I was also just sitting there just like watching them have this conversation as water is gushing in and going, "All right, no panic here.
No.
Let's just watch."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Light Toller is also psychic. He knows everything and he can be everywhere at all times. I have not figured out how he's able to do that. But while he's being in 63 places at once, there is a terrible closed roomed drama happening on the bridge where Captain Smith is staring out the window and having a conversation to himself. And I believe it is Chief Officer Wilde and Lightoller are trying to have a human conversation behind him. And it really just felt like an extremely strange community theater three-person scene. I was like, what's
Yeah.
going on?
I know exactly what you're talking about. Like one of
Yeah.
those plays where it's amateur theater, nobody really knows how to interact with each other on stage. You
No.
have three people on stage. Two of them are like, well, I guess I'll have a conversation. And the third person is like, but I'm the star, so I'm just going to do my own thing and ignore you guys.
Yeah, because what he is doing in this is looking for the ship that people, there's been a lot of long running speculation that the Californian was nearby and that you could see the lights. And so that's what they were alluding to. They were having Smith looking through the binoculars or looking through the window being like, that what is it doing? Why isn't it responding? Et cetera, et cetera. But it's not directed in a way that utilizes emotion. So it just seems like he's muttering to himself while there is
Yeah.
a Class A emergency happening in the background.
So I would love to know if Titanic 666 is where we finally get both the iceberg as the villain, and we find out that like all of these like weird conversations and things that are happening between Captain and the folks on the boat are due to some like eldritch horror that's in the water, and it's influencing all of their minds.
If they haven't made that already, we should write a comic for that because I would 1,000% do that.
Yeah, fund us. Let's do it.
Yeah, send us subscribe to our non-existent Patreon. We'll do it. Um, and then we go from there to the scene that I think this is where Mrs. Batley totally buries everything. And as everyone is queuing for the purser's office, she screams in the Mansons' faces about his affair and his affair child. And Batley hauls her away, accurately screaming at her that she has ruined his career, which is true. Like, if they get off
Yeah.
of that ship, like, if this was, not an emergency and it turns out everything was fine, he's done.
Yeah. That was also again just so bizarre. It's like there were multiple moments I think in the show where people had their final conflict, but
Yeah.
it didn't feel like it was natural. It felt like they had a supernatural inclination that they were not going to survive, so they had to say this now, or it was never
Yeah.
going to happen.
And that's, I think, the risk that you take with this sort of jumping around in the timeline deal. What it's supposed to do is build intrigue, but what it really does is basically show you who lives and who dies.
Yeah, I actually think that this miniseries would have benefited from having two more episodes so that they could actually draw out more of these conflicts and make
Hmm.
it so they made sense instead of like Muriel Batley just erupting out of fucking nowhere.
Yeah, she just blows up, which is again, I tend to be a person that blows up under stress, but it wouldn't have been like that.
Yeah,
It probably would have been like, don't touch
I I don't know. I would have needed a reason to be pushed that far, and she didn't. She just saw the pandemonium of everybody else trying to get their jewelry and was like, "Aha! I have my moment to go scream in this woman's face about something." Like,
me. She's been waiting for this for like how many years now? She's just like, fucking finally.
yeah,
Man, 10! It's 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 such a weird show in which so much happens, but yet nothing happens at all.
yeah. That's also how I would describe the music for this episode
Oh my
because it
God.
was so generic throughout the entire episode, and it didn't. There was a moment that I don't even remember what scene it was, but I made a note about how people were laughing, but the music was just dour and sad. Like it didn't fit any of the emotions that we were supposed to feel.
There were so many times when the score sort of either really, really betrayed or really, really contradicted the
Yeah.
show. Like there was, I can't remember any examples now, but I think like every scene with Peter has extremely ominous music where it's sort of like it never gives you any sort of reason to doubt his character, even though they're showing him doing all these good deeds. You're supposed to start to feel sympathy for him. But when you give these undercurrents of everyone doing what they're doing, and then every time he's around there being a tone of like an ominous tone,
Yeah.
you're not giving them any mystery at all. And it happens so many times where the score is just either really, really not the correct emotion or just flat out bad.
Yeah, and I think the cinematography kind of follows the same suit in a way.
Agree.
Like there's a lot of moments where it's very dark, and we'll get into how
Yeah.
dark it is in episode 4 because it is visually very dark.
Yeah, I
But
don't have a
again,
lot of notes because you simply can't see a lot.
yeah, a lot of my notes are about that. But with Peter in particular, like all of the cinematography with him, they also linger on his face with this
Yeah.
music, with kind of dark lighting, and you're just like, this is an evil, horrible man.
Yeah, it's so obvious. It doesn't, there part of watching anything is there's mystery involved. Like I saw the Barbie movie last night. I stayed up way too late watching Barbie.
Yeah,
Number one, it was really, really good. But number two, even just plot wise, it was not at all what I thought it would be. Now there were some beats halfway through where because I like to pick up on stuff, I was like, oh, I bet it's gonna be this, or I bet it's gonna be that. And I was wrong a couple times, and I was right a couple times, but there was intrigue to it. And it was the combination of being right and having it quote unquote feel predictable or having that sort of satisfaction of being like, ah, got it. And a couple times of being wrong and being like, see that coming. That's what makes a watching experience really joyful or really worth it. And in this thing, it was all stuff that I could see coming. Nothing catches you
yeah.
by surprise. So I just you don't feel engaged or incentivized to be engaged in that way because it's like, why? You just told me everything I need to know. You backlit this man. You all but like frontlit him with green. There's an ominous undertone, and you're shooting him from below, so he just looks like towering and menacing. Like there's no mystery to this man.
Yeah, I don't know what
Excuse
it
me.
says that Barbie is a better cinematic masterpiece than like a telling of the Titanic,
I
but
mean, I
I
think that it
support
says that
that.
the Barbie movie had a lot more money than this miniseries.
That's probably very true.
I I I I want to get into this a little bit more in the final episode because I think it's where it really comes into play. But I
Mhm.
do want to talk about how when you make something Titanic related or you make anything in today's day and age, the budget is such an influencing factor.
Yeah, we will definitely get into it in episode 4.
Yeah.
But in this episode, we have at
Yes.
least gotten to um people finally bailing.
Finally bailing is a kind way of describing it. Yeah. This time we're getting a little bit further into the sinking and we see uh the water's coming up onto the bridge. The man not the Mantons, the
The
Batleys.
Batleys? Yeah.
Yep, there we go. They have their little couples resolution moment where she was like, I
Yeah.
used to be a nice person. Why am I not nice anymore?
I'm sorry I turned into a miserable bitch, is basically what she said.
Yeah, basically. And then he's like, I forgive you because he's very kind. And then they run to cling onto the collapsible and the water starts coming up and they Jack
Yeah.
and Rose each other.
Oh, they really Jack and Rose each other. Um, I I also kind of hated that because I don't know about you, but there was not one moment in this show where I liked Muriel.
No,
So the fact that she had that section where she said, "I'm sorry I turned out to be this way when I was so happy before," made no sense because it's like, I don't, are you doing this because you want us to have sympathy for this character?
clearly.
But she never showed any of this before, so it's not
No.
like we care.
No, and it's disappointing because I think in a vacuum that scene is actually quite good. That actress and that actor in that scene have very good chemistry. If it had been a different story, it would have been a very heartbreaking scene, last scene between a husband and wife. But instead, it was just this random out of nowhere, like undeserved resolution.
Yeah.
Like we didn't see you learn your lesson, you just learned it.
It makes me wonder if that line was actually scripted or if the actress herself was like, I feel like this is right in the moment. Because it just kind of came out of nowhere.
And it had more authenticity than anything she'd ever said before in the show.
Yep.
It's really possible. It was actually, like I said, in a vacuum. Very nice scene. Well
Yeah.
acted. Kind of makes you almost feel something, and then you remember that it's this show.
Hmm. What I really did feel for was all the dogs. Because
No
this is,
goes.
this is when we see all the dogs kind of, we get to see one dog
Yes.
get shoved onto a boat with a woman, but otherwise we see a bunch of other dogs running around on the deck. Well, at least we see one or two dogs because they stop by the
There were
Batleys.
12. There were 12 on Titanic.
Yeah, and that just made me very sad. So,
It's sadder when you realize that only 3 of them made it.
oh,
Yeah. It's one of those things where they had dog related scenes in the Cameron film outside of the initial one where you see like a dog boarding the ship.
mhm.
But outside of that, I think they cut all them because they were like, yeah,
Yeah, that's a little too sad.
just a little bit. But do you have anything left on this episode before we
Um,
leave?
no, because that's actually how the episode ended was like you said, just the two Batleys about to maybe turn over a lifeboat as the water is rushing on to the deck, but we'll have to see what happens with them.
I guess. Tune in next week for the next episode of Titanic the miniseries.
Yay.
Bye.
Bye.